carry some questions. We have lots of time, so let's hear from the audience.
Okay, Terry, just a brief question. You said crucifixion of a nation, and I'd like to ask you to elaborate on that, because I don't think it captures the enormity, because Syria's cobbled together as modern Syria's cobbled together after World War I by various deals and stuff, and the Assad regime was based in a religious minority, which was right. And you also have Kurds and I think Armenians as well, and other people. Could you say a little bit about what's happened to them? Because it sounds as though there might be a crucifixion of several nations and not just one.
Fair play. Fair play. I don't know that there was a sense of some nationhood. And that people were quite proud of. And this is something that is actually a matter of pride, I think, that you'll find among Syrians, is that they were kind to one another and they were respectful of one another's traditions. Not many people are particularly happy with the Alawi ruling class. It used to be a religion. I don't think it's been a religion in several generations, quite honestly. It's an economic and political and military elite. That's all. Okay, it's a crucifixion of several nations. Okay, I'll go with that.
Fine. Go ahead.
I wonder if you can give us some insight into the leadership in Syria. In the press, it's always Assad, Assad, Assad. About a year and a half ago, I heard an interview on the CBC with a senior official, I forget whether he was a general who had defected from Syria, who indicated it wasn't just Assad, but it was a group of people. Who they are, I don't know. You hear about Ba'ath Party. Another friend, a Lebanese friend who spent quite a bit of time in Lebanon, said, it's not just Assad, it's a group of people that are like a Syrian mafia. Can you give us any insight into that? I'd appreciate it. I have a hearing problem. This is not a very good sound system for me. Could you speak on my
Okay, how's
slowly?
that?
Thanks.
All right. I think your friend has probably said as much as I would have needed to say. That's quite a true thing. It's been 43 years since the Assad family sort of took over the Ba'ath Party, took over the government. The chinless Dauphin, as he was once known, the current Assad, Bashar al-Assad, has presided or began to preside over what was presented as a kind of an opening up, a liberalizing of the country. It happened in a couple of fits and starts. There was actually the original Arab Spring, if you like, you could put at around 2000, 2001 in Damascus. Anti-regime protests and that Bashar didn't really know what to do with, and so he ended up sort of throwing everybody in jail and quieted things down. There was also, it is the Alawi, gangsterism, if you like, and there's Christians, there's Sunnis involved in it as well, but it is, the core of it is that sort of ruling elite that comes from the Latakia area for the most part, towards the coast. But there was also a kind of the kind of illusion of a political opening, which is kind of interesting for us here in Ottawa, and also interesting because this George Galloway character was mentioned at the beginning, believe it or not. One of the parties that the Baathists allowed to operate above ground, beginning in around 2006, 2007, I believe, was the Syrian Social Nationalist Party. And George Galloway, actually, before all the foo-for-ah of him making a speech and saying how much money he was giving Hamas and then claiming to have been barred from Canada, had been to Canada 3 times, 4 times, I think, before then, and of course has come since. I think it was 2008, Galloway was here in Ottawa and in Montreal for the 75th anniversary of the Syrian Social Nationalist Party, which has its own stylized swastika, its own lovely uniform and spit-polished boots, its own anthem sung to the tune of Deutschland, Deutschland über alles, and dreams of a greater Syria from the Euphrates to the Nile. So in the ruling elite, the political elite, in the centers of power, you get that sort of hue and coloration as well. And they feel very at home with the Ba'ath Party, which is kind of an Islamic fascist party. Right? Saddam Hussein was a Ba'athist. And it's similar, I think, in some ways to what we saw in the collapse of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union and the Soviet Union itself, where you get the sort of the commissars become new capitalists, right? So the appearance of liberalization that was underway about a decade or so ago in Syria was, as much as anything, just turning sort of apparatchiks into supercar dealers, or big businessmen. So I don't know if that helps.
I may have missed something at the start of your talk, but what kind of implications are there in terms of sort of a relative decline in the image and role of the United States and the opportunities for Russia with the traditional importance of that linkage? But before you address that, as a kind of a side issue, you mentioned the Maghreb, which I don't even know how to say.
Oh, I'm sorry, North Africa. Yeah, Libya, Tunisia.
Well, I'm not sure why you mentioned it. In a history book I'm reading right now, it's kind of central to it. Are there echoes of that now in Syria or in that world?
No, I'm just referring to the Arab world generally when I refer to the Maghreb and the Levant, the Middle East generally.
Okay, it's just interesting.
But the stature of the United States you were talking about.
Yeah.
This is the other epochal thing. I think this is the thing. The other penny that hasn't dropped is that. Look at the way the forces are lined up. Look at the forces that are cannibalizing Syria. And what you will see is a very, very stark chasm and abyss between, on the one hand, Russia on the Security Council, China on the Security Council, the Khomeinists in Tehran, Hezbollah, and on the other side, you know what? You got little Israel. And little Israel manages to get in there and they'll box at people's ears and they'll drop a couple of bombs and they'll get out of there and it's like, Bob's your uncle. For some reason, we can't figure out how that's done. We have 16 different intelligence agencies and we're going, oh gee, we don't know who the good guys are in Syria. And on the other side of that abyss, you have people like, you've got the NATO countries. You actually got the Arab League, most of the Arab League. You've got those countries of the world that purport to be civilized and democratic. But you have no champion. You have the French every once in a while. Vive la France. I mean, they led the way in Mali, they led the way in Libya, and they were ready to bomb Damascus. The American stature, it's not just about American stature. I think it may be the end of the American age. It may be over, I don't know.
Just one thing. You've mentioned a lot of nations, but you mentioned Persia without mentioning Turkey or the Ottomans. Any comment there?
Well, God.
No, but it's just in a way we keep saying the United States.
The Turks are kind of, they're behaving very much like the Saudis in this. They want Assad gone. They're a NATO country, Turkey. We forget that. You see, this is a predicament, by the way, that Jordan finds itself in, is that nominally it recognizes the Syrian coalition of the opposition as the government in waiting, right? As does the Arab League, as does the United States, as does most of Europe. Canada doesn't. Canada's a really sort of eccentric uncle in all of this. It's very peculiar, and which is okay. I mean, we could use that eccentricity, that being outside the box a little bit, to some useful advantage, but I don't think we are. But in any case, little Jordan is in Syria's shadow, and it really can't afford to be very saucy. So it's in a very, very difficult position in that way. And I think I'm not unhappy with the role that Canada. I mean, if we're going to be like, we basically subcontracted our foreign policy on Syria to Paul Dewar and the New Democratic Party. Okay. And if you like that kind of thing, you like that kind of thing. I'm not particularly unhappy with the way Canada has resigned itself to behaving in this matter. I mean, I would like to see the skies of Damascus darkened with drones, yeah. But, I'm dreaming. That's, it's not going to happen.
Thanks, Larry. Sorry if I might have missed this, but I had to take care of something for friends, so I might have missed it at the beginning if you touched on this. But over the summer, I actually heard, it was on CBC radio, they had an interview with a communications official from the Free Syrian Army, and they were asking him, all about, what's going on in Syria, what's happening, what about the peace process, all these things. And there was almost a moment of clarity in it when he was talking all about how they wanted peace, they wanted to sit down, they wanted to talk, and they said, well, what do you need? And I think he might have slipped for a moment, and he said, well, we need more guns.
Yeah.
And the question I had was, what is Assad supposed to do when he's dealing with people like that? Because, he's often painted as the bad guy, and granted, whether he's a good guy or not,
Is there any ambiguity?
But it's the question of, the way I look at it is the question of relativeness, right?
Oh, well, I don't.
I'm not
okay, what do you like in a peace talks kind of environment? What is Assad supposed to do? At Geneva, what is he supposed to say? Well, I would say exactly. I'm not an advocate of the peace of the tomb, and that is what's on offer. And Lakhdar Brahimi and Mokhtar Lamani are, in my view, I think the Free Syrian Army is quite correct about these characters. They are the UN envoys for peace. And their role, in my view, is to discredit and undermine the revolution, to undermine the agenda of the Free Syrian Army and the coalition, and to ensure that Bashar al-Assad has some way of staying in power. That's unacceptable to the vast majority of the Syrian people.